We're just waiting for people to start rolling in. So I will just introduce the topic for today. We're going to be talking about trauma-informed regulation and what recommendations resulted from the independent review of the college's conduct process and what is the college doing with those recommendations. So that is what we will cover today. To the next slide, just a little bit of housekeeping. The usual Zoom etiquette that we go over, please keep your microphones off unless you are speaking, but otherwise keep yourselves muted, and you're welcome to leave your video on or turn it off. It's entirely up to you. We will have some time at the end to respond to the questions that we received through the SurveyMonkey link that we sent out with the link to this town hall. So we have a couple of questions to address there. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop those into the chat, and staff will respond to those questions at the end. We are recording the presentation today, so it will be available to view later for anyone who is unable to attend or wants to go back to the recording. With that, I will hand it over to Ken Lomp to deliver a land acknowledgement.
Hi, folks. I'm the current president of the CRPO, and I would like to, as Amy pointed out, begin with a land acknowledgement. And so I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous people of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land, which we all call home. To do this, to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, the Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each in our own way move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I'm pleased to welcome you to the third of 9 town halls that we will be hosting in the fiscal year. So far, we have offered a State of the Union update that covered work that has happened in the last year or so, and work that is planned for the coming year, as well as a session on governance and the regulatory framework. Today's session will look at the conduct function of the college with a particular emphasis on the trauma-informed review that the college commissioned last year. Staff has responses to the questions that were posed through SurveyMonkey before today's meeting. Thanks to those of you who took the time to shape the content of the session. According to 2021 Statistics Canada survey on COVID-19 and mental health, 63% of Canadians have experienced at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. As clinicians, I think that most RPs will have an understanding of trauma and trauma responses. As a regulator, CRPO is committed to ensuring that its complaints and reports processes are responsive to those who report having experienced trauma, are trauma-informed, and procedurally fair. Enhancing support, accommodation, and accessibility reduces the chances of re-traumatization for client members of the public, witnesses, and registrants interacting with CRPO's investigation processes. As an organization, CRPO has always intended to apply the principles of transparency, accessibility, and fairness with empathy, compassion, and humility. Over the last several years, there have been cases that have caused council, committee members, and staff to critically reflect on the college's approach and processes. In doing so, we acknowledge the importance of being more trauma-informed and determined that we need to review our processes and make changes to avoid doing harm. The college contracted the Barbara Schleifer Commemorative Clinic to undertake a review of the complaints and reports process, to delve into the problems we have already identified, to determine other areas of our work that were not trauma-informed, and to provide recommendations for improvement. This work started with the understanding and acceptance that council, committees, and staff would need to remain open to change if we are going to transform the way in which we regulate. I'm proud that we undertook this work and happy to be able to have our progress presented here today. The trauma-informed approach undertaken by the college is consistent with the modernization and more responsiveness across the CRPO that I have alluded to in the previous two town halls. Amy has put up the town hall schedule for the remaining town hall meetings with you. All of the sessions will be recorded and available on the college's YouTube channel so that they can be accessed later. You'll see email and website updates for the upcoming sessions, and you're encouraged to keep track of them. Provide feedback on questions that you would like to see answered in these sessions. We are pleased to have the opportunity to engage with our registrants and look forward to connecting over the course of the year. On that note, I will turn it over to staff.
Thanks, Ken. My name is Amy. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a manager of governance at the college. Before we get to Nakai and Jenna, I wanted to just cover a few concepts that relate to how the CRPO carries out its mandate of public protection. The approach that council, committee, and staff take are key to how we address and resolve complaints and reports in the conduct department and are a backdrop to the conduct update and the trauma-informed review that Nakai and Jenna will be presenting on today. Next slide. Council and committee members require a specific set of skills and expertise to carry out the work of addressing complaints and reports about registrant conduct and competence. A great deal of what is asked of members on the Inquiries, Complaints, and Reports Committee, the Discipline and Fitness to Practice Committees, is highly specialized. They're asked to read and understand submissions from clients and registered psychotherapists, to provide investigation reports, to understand the regulations, and learn about precedent cases. For this reason, the CRPO adopted a competence framework for council, committee, and panel members that outlines the required expertise and experience. Staff and council conduct ongoing evaluations of competence development for all members of council and work to provide relevant education and professional development opportunities to make sure that the members of council and on committees and panels have the support that they need to develop and to hone their competence. The CRPO has also adopted a right touch approach and a risk-based approach to regulation. In short, this means that we strive to get as close to the issues as possible so that we have a solid understanding of the risk that any issue poses. And then we use the least amount of regulatory force possible. This means that we look to support professionalism and professional identity as a way of keeping good practitioners in the field, and we require remediation rather than punishment to address deficits in knowledge, skills, or judgment. Nakai will present more on statistics that speak to the ways in which the CRPO addresses complaints a little bit later in the presentation. On this slide, these are the college's current strategic priorities. I'll read them aloud. a trusted authority, build CRPO's presence as a trusted authority for psychotherapy, clear communications, further develop communications to support clear, transparent, and dynamic interaction with system partners, effective infrastructure, strengthen operations and governance infrastructure and system partnership, collaborate with other system partners to contribute to better access to mental health services. This ties into the trauma review that Jenna will be presenting on. The college is committed to working in a way that fosters trust from the public and from registrants. Operating in a trauma-informed way is a key part of this. The 2023 College Performance Measurement Framework, we're including this slide, and this is also an active link. Just to flag that the college is held accountable to the College Performance Measurement Framework, or the CPMF. It's also held accountable to standards in regulation, and we report on our work and our progress through the College Performance Measurement Framework every year. As I mentioned, this slide has a live link, so we'll share it when we post the slides after this town hall. And we'll link you up to the most recent submission for the report. So you can access it if you're interested in reading about the college's performance over the last year. Of note today, in addition to the statistics about cases that come before the ICRC, is the idea that we're constantly working toward ensuring that we're responsive to changing public expectations and incorporating best practices in how we work. Growing awareness of how trauma can impact people is driving changes and improvements to how we work within the realm of professional conduct. Being mindful of how the complaints process can impact everyone, clients, witnesses, and RPs who are involved in the complaints and reports, as well as staff and panel members, is at the forefront of the work that we are reporting on today. So with that, I can hand this over to Nakai Garnett to provide an update on conduct statistics.
Thank you, Amy, and hello, everyone. My name's Nakai Garnett, and I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs. And before we explore why trauma-informed practices and regulation can improve our processes, as well as look at the college's trauma-informed review and recommendations, we'll look at CRPO's conduct data as reported on the college's Performance Measurement Framework, or more commonly referred to as the CPMF. As mentioned, the purpose of the CPMF is to help the public understand how well colleges are doing their job and to help continually improve accountability, transparency, and oversight. All regulatory health colleges in Ontario are required to report to the ministry each year with respect to the CPMF. And the CPMF actually covers a wide range of topics, including how the college is processing complaints and reports about their registrants. So now we'll look at the conduct data from 2023. So this would be from January to December 2023. Next slide, please. So this slide looks at the distribution of formal complaints and reports by theme. And this is just a snapshot of the conduct statistics that the college reports to the ministry. We're also, as a college, in the process of completing a comprehensive data analysis project, which will look at additional conduct data. But as you can see from this slide, in terms of the distribution of formal complaints and reports in 2023, we received 106 formal complaints. This is actually up from 76 complaints in the previous calendar year and is actually the biggest jump we've ever seen year over year. Now, this may be attributed to the steady increase of registered psychotherapists becoming registered, combined with the fact that there may be more of a general awareness of the college's existence amongst the public. I also want to note that in 2023, we opened 17 registrar's reports, and this is very similar to previous years. And just to clarify that we receive many more reports each year. For example, in the last fiscal year, we received 90 reports in total. However, only a small portion of reports actually turn into registrar's reports. And reports are opened when an employer or a member of the public brings information to the college's attention and indicates that they would like to report and not be a party to the investigation. Many of these reports are mandatory reports, as well as mandatory self-reports, and staff in turn review these reports and determine whether there are reasonable and probable grounds to appoint an investigator, at which time the report would become a registrar's report. The college takes a right touch approach to processing reports. To resolve low-risk reports, the registrar may decide it's more appropriate to provide advice to the registrant compared to opening a formal investigation. This type of advice is still a part of the registrant's prior history. I also wanted to provide more information about the different themes specified in the College Performance Measurement Framework.
Yeah.
When staff are preparing the CPMF, we actually code each complaint
Wait, what?
and report issue twice. First, we code it to specify which professional practice standard directly relates to the issue. Next, we code which standard applies to each of the CPMF themes listed above. Please note that when it states NR, that means not reportable and just indicates that there's a value of less than 5. Please also note that the numbers in each column do not add up to the values on the bottom of the chart. This is because we code each complaint issue, and many times there are 2 to 3 different issues in one complaint. I will now give you a high-level summary of some of the themes that you see in this chart, specifically which practice standards they relate to. So as you see, there's competence in patient care, and this refers to reporting unsafe practices, providing and receiving clinical supervision, consent, unnecessary treatment, electronic practice, or even discontinuing services, amongst other types of issues, similar issues. Then there's the intent to mislead, including fraud, which refers to using undue influence or abuse, not including sexual abuse, issues regarding the complaints process and issuing accurate documents. I would argue that failure to issue accurate documents is most common issue we see in relation to this theme. And this might include inaccurate invoices or inaccurate reports drafted to be used in court. Another theme that you see in the chart is professional conduct and behavior, which refers to accepting the regulatory authority of the college, disgraceful, dishonorable, and unprofessional conduct, conduct unbecoming, as well as conflict of interest and confidentiality. And lastly, harassment and boundary violations refers to multiple or dual relationships which do not constitute sexual abuse. Next slide, please. Next, we'll look, one slide before that, please. Next, we'll look at the distribution of ICRC decisions by theme. So there's been a total of 62 decisions which were issued in 2023. Remedial agreements, also known as reflection papers, are included in the final column of this table. Just a reminder that each outcome is coded, and often there are more than one issue and outcome for each decision. And similar to the previous year, ICRC continues to issue a lot of written advice and orders specified continuing education and remediation plans, or for short programs rather, or for short SCRPs under the professional conduct and behavior category. And also this category includes practice standards on accepting the regulatory authority of the college, disgraceful, dishonorable, and unprofessional conduct, conduct unbecoming, conflict of interest, and confidentiality. Thank you. Next slide, please. And so linking this all back to trauma-informed approaches to regulation, as Amy mentioned, there is a growing awareness of how trauma can impact individuals involved in conduct processes. And this awareness continues to result in changes and improvements to conduct processes. We need to consider the trauma experienced by everyone involved in the complaints process. And the goal of a trauma-informed regulation is to minimize harm and re-traumatization for all individuals involved in the college's processes. And this in turn can result in hopefully decreased frustration and disillusionment with the college's processes, reduce the stigma and shame experienced by people who are involved in conduct processes, as well as decrease silent suffering, and as a potential added benefit, decrease any reputational harm that might that might occur as a result of the conduct processes. Next slide, please. So who benefits from this trauma-informed regulation? Well, pretty much everyone who's involved in the conduct process benefits from a trauma-informed regulation process. Whether or not they've experienced trauma in their lives, that does not matter. Still, everyone does benefit. And so the complainants and registrants who are much more closely involved in the conduct process obviously would benefit from a trauma-informed regulation approach, but so do witnesses who are interviewed during the process of an investigation, the Inquiries, Complaints, and Reports Committee panel, as well as the discipline tribunal members. Regulatory staff, so the staff that works at CRPO, benefit from a trauma-informed regulation approach, as well as the investigators. Next slide, please. And so this slide is actually just showing that there has been, or just reiterating that there has been a call to action for a trauma-informed approach for regulation for regulators. And this slide is actually borrowed from CNAR, which is the Canadian Network of Agencies for Regulation, or CNAR for short, and a presentation that was made last year during that conference, during their annual conference. And so a trauma-informed approach for regulators truly aims to uphold procedural justice standards. It hopes to provide support for those who are affected affected by the conduct process or involved in the conduct process. And overall, it's hoping to improve the overall experience of those involved in regulatory processes. And this is a call for a balanced approach in doing that, balancing both the duty to protect the public along with consideration for the well-being of those who are involved in the investigation process. Next slide, please. And this image is also borrowed from a presentation from the CNAR conference last year. So core principles of trauma-informed care actually easily translate to trauma-informed practices as they relate to regulation. So we need to focus on the safety of those involved in our processes. We need to allow for as much as possible choice and control within our processes to those who are involved. We need to collaborate with those who are involved. The college needs to demonstrate that we are trustworthy, and also, as much as possible, try to empower those who are involved in our conduct processes to truly have a trauma-informed approach to regulation. Now I will hand it over to my colleague Jenna to discuss the trauma-informed review report and the recommendations.
Perfect. Thank you, Nakai. Hello, everyone. My name is Jenna Smith, and I'm the manager of professional conduct. I also oversaw the work of this trauma review alongside our registrar, Deborah Adams. So as Ken previously mentioned, the college set out to review its complaints and reports processes to ensure its practices are responsive to those who report having experienced trauma, are trauma-informed, and also are procedurally fair. That was our intention with this review. So how can we improve our processes, enhance support and accommodation? The review was completed by the Barbara Schleifer Commemorative Clinic over the last year, or BSCC for short, and included a full review of ICRC resources. They also conducted interviews with complainants, registrants, reporters, witnesses, and other individuals involved in the investigation and remediation process. This was an exploratory review with a small number of participants focused on some of the most complex cases or where things didn't go as planned. The report from BSCC was finalized at the end of last year, and it contained a list of recommendations the college has committed to exploring. Next slide, please. For the purpose of this review, we define trauma as the lasting emotional response that results from living through a distressing event. Trauma-informed practices within the professional conduct department is all about being aware of the prevalence of trauma, recognizing trauma responses and how these may show up differently for everyone, and taking steps to avoid re-traumatization while simultaneously supporting healing. Next slide. And this image is also borrowed from a CNR presentation. Our goal is to enhance trust with the public and with the profession. And so we can do this by communicating in plain language, managing expectations, specifically around outcomes and the length of the investigation process, balancing risk against the impact on the people interacting with our process, supporting a culture of learning and accountability, and then also by reducing stress through efficient processes. Meeting these goals also means that registrants and complainants may be more accepting of the outcome. Next slide. We hope to alleviate fear, anxiety, and stress about the process for complainants, reporters, witnesses, but also for registrants who have a lot at stake. We recognize there is a person on the other side of that phone or on the other side of the email, and that this individual may be going through one of the most stressful processes of their life. We also hope to reduce uncertainty. So the more we can prepare everyone for the next step of the process, the better. Other goals of this review include reducing the perception of an unfair process. We want to improve satisfaction and engagement with the process. So for example, helping clients feel comfortable coming forward and participating in an interview. Also enhancing the quality of decision-making and reducing overly legal processes are other goals that we've set through this trauma review. Next slide. This review provided CRPO with a variety of opportunities to improve, specifically in the areas of communication, resources, monitoring and evaluation, policy, and staffing and approach. Some of the recommendations are in progress, while others are already completed. So the first slide here we'll show you is the committee and staff education and training. So engaging ICRC and staff in ongoing education and training is key to ensuring our practices are trauma-informed. The college receives a number of complaints where intimate partner violence is a focus of the investigation. This could be a client or even the registrant themselves who's been impacted. These files require staff and committee to be competent in recognizing trauma responses so that communication and decision-making are both supportive and reasonable. Staff and committee have engaged in ongoing DEI training as well. Other recommended areas of education and training include pathologizing and legal bullying, which would be when a person is using family court or other administrative processes, such as CRPO's complaints process, to abuse or harass an ex-partner. The training must be ongoing and needs to be embedded in plenary committee meetings, as well as the onboarding process for both staff and committee members. Next slide. This review highlighted a number of opportunities for policy development. So for example, expanding internal policies to protect committee and staff also from harassment. We will also be implementing an accommodations policy that will offer a list of accommodations at each step of the process. This list will not be exhaustive, but important for everyone to know that there are options for accommodations throughout the complaints process. So for example, offering to have a support person meet with a complainant to help them organize their thoughts into writing. For cases where safety concerns have been identified, we generally ask the person who identified the safety concerns if they would like to be notified when the other party receives a document from the college. And this is just so that they can put a safety plan in place. Ultimately, the goal is to, oh, no, if you want to just stay on the other end, thanks. Ultimately, the goal is to build universal practices into the college's procedures so that harm is prevented for all parties. Approximately 1/3 of complaints received by the college are from third parties. And so what I mean by this is it's a complainant who is someone who's not the client and not the client's authorized representative. So it could be a parent who's complaining about the care provided to their child. It might be an insurance company or a person who is complaining about care provided to their ex-partner. With a complaint, the complainant always receives a copy of the decision and reasons document. And so maintaining the confidentiality of the client, who's not the party to the complaint, is of utmost importance. Staff and committee must be attuned to issues of harassment, legal bullying, and also to those safety concerns when determining next steps for the investigation. This also applies to deciding what information can be disclosed to the complainant. A third-party complainant policy has actually already been drafted to address these concerns, and it's going to be presented to ICRC in the fall. Okay, next slide. What does trauma-informed communication look like? It's important that each person is aware of their role and that everyone is also aware of staff's role in the process. It's key that timelines and possible results are outlined clearly. When communicating with complainants, staff should seek input on the preferred frequency and mode of communication, to be attuned to information that might be alarming for someone to receive. So for example, for some people, seeing the registrant's name on the subject line of a letter could be really distressing. And asking for input about things like if a file might be referred to discipline, would they like to request a publication ban? When communicating with registrants, again, it's important to ask about preferred frequency and mode of communication. It's also important to provide resources for support and to encourage registrants to seek support from professional associations. When communicating with any recipient, it's best for staff to avoid legalese and to stick to plain language. Learning more about preference for communication at the outset of the complaint is a trauma-informed approach. So making assumptions or taking a one-size-fits-all doesn't necessarily work. By taking a user-centered approach, we can ask questions like, do you want notice ahead of time? Would you prefer that we disclose the documents to a trusted friend or a loved one so that you can review the materials in a safe space? So what works for you? Staff recently created information sheets for registrants, complainants, and reporters, and these are actually posted now on our website. These PDF documents are really easily digestible, easy to look at, easy to print, and they offer specific information based on the role that that party is playing in the process. Specific information for complainants about sexual abuse is also included in that information sheet. Next slide, please. So in terms of approach, BSCC's review did suggest the college consider using alternative dispute resolution. This process involves a mediator who would communicate with both parties to come to an amicable agreement about the outcome. To date, the college remains concerned about the appropriateness of using a mediator or a lawyer to resolve such sensitive and personal issues. Many other colleges use ADR to resolve issues related to things like billing. So for example, the client may wish to receive a refund, and so a mediator is involved to kind of deal with that. But this is very different than the types of issues CRPO typically sees. We also worry about the possibility of re-traumatization, so for the complainant, but also for the registrant, when asking a mediator to facilitate these really emotionally charged communications between parties who might have a really long-standing therapeutic relationship. So certainly something that ICRC will be discussing in future. In terms of staffing, the college will be exploring the role of a public advisor or a navigator. This person would provide trauma-informed support and guidance to complainants and reporters who are contemplating whether to file a complaint or a report. The navigator would also assist sexual abuse survivors who wish to apply for funding or to find a therapist or another care provider. Over the next year, the college will be reviewing the scope of this role, the costs associated, and then also taking a look at how our role as a regulator fits in. Next slide. So far, I've discussed a number of tangible recommendations and considerations. However, there are other large-scale opportunities for improvement. So, for example, government lobbying to explore a mechanism that would allow minor complaints to be dismissed more easily without convening a panel or doing a full investigation. A full investigation can be really time and resource intensive, but more importantly, we know that lengthy investigations contribute to re-traumatization. Another issue with the current regulatory framework is that the college is required to process all complaints from members of the public, even if the complainant is not the client. To protect safety and confidentiality of clients, it would be helpful if changes to legislation could be made that permit the college to reroute these complaints into reports. And the reason I say that, just for context, is that in a report, the reporter doesn't receive the decision and reasons, whereas with a complaint, the complainant does receive a full copy of the decision and reasons. In terms of monitoring and evaluation, over the last year, and Nakai had mentioned this briefly, we've developed a large database containing information about each complaint and report received over the last 3+ years. This includes information about third-party complaints and also about frivolous and vexatious complaints. So we're looking right now at how best to kind of package that up and publish some of this data. We also track timelines for complaints and reports to identify where delays in the process are occurring. Last year, we initiated a pilot project to remove the complainant reply part of the process. So previously, we were requesting the complainant's response to the investigation, and then we were sending that over to the complainant, who would have an opportunity to respond. Once they respond, we would send everything back to the registrant for one final opportunity to reply. We found that not only was this distressing at times for the complainant, but that doing this was delaying the process and the outcome by approximately 3 months. So in the last 8 months since this pilot project began, we have seen some really vast improvements in terms of processing timelines, but we will keep you updated, and that's a decision about that pilot project is expected to happen later this year. So that's it for me. I think we have some questions.
Thanks, Jenna. So we received a couple of questions through the SurveyMonkey link that we provided earlier. So each of the upcoming slides will address each question on its own slide. So I believe the first slide is me, so I will go ahead and answer this question. How will we hold one another accountable to anti-oppressive frameworks? And what work is CRPO doing to continue to decolonize itself? That's a great question. Thank you for submitting it. The CRPO has an active diversity, equity, and inclusion working group. It is composed of 15 RPs who are appointed to the working group with a sort of variety of intersectional identities. The DEI working group, along with the DEI strategy, is to make sure that we're reducing barriers and removing barriers for people, clients, and RPs from communities that have and who continue to experience barriers to access to care. As an organization, we've made the commitment to ensure that the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion inform all of our work, and that applies to the review and the implementation of the recommendations from the BSCC. The Barbara Schleifer Commemorative Clinic, as an organization, works from an intersectional and an anti-oppressive informed approach. And this is why we chose to work with them. And we're pleased to see that the recommendations that they've made are aligned with this approach. The college will continue to report on the progress related to the review and implementing the recommendations that Jenna spoke about. And I will pass it over to Nakai to respond to the next question.
Thanks, Amy. And so we received via SurveyMonkey 3 questions that have a common theme. So we've grouped them together in terms of responding. The first question is that individual witness colleagues being in a situation where an abusive partner of the client has made a false complaint to CRPO and they were forced to terminate care with the client as per the policy. Additional question, what will be done to prevent abusers of clients from being able to use the complaint system as a tool of control towards our clients? And lastly, will there be any measures implemented to penalize making frivolous or vexatious, frivolous, and or abusive complaints? And so first, I want to clarify that all health colleges are legally required to process all formal complaints. And our ability to dismiss allegations is very limited. And unless a complaint meets specific criteria to be deemed frivolous and vexatious or moot for that matter, we are obligated to investigate. And even when a formal complaint is deemed to be frivolous, vexatious, or an abusive process, it still has to go through a specified process that is outlined in the Regulated Health Professions Act. And this process actually in turn is not that much shorter than sometimes a formal complaint process, although it is streamlined. Also, as was shared earlier, CRPO works in a way that is right touch and wrist-based. And in doing that, we strive to make sure that our approach and any decisions that we make are aligned with the degree of risk or actual harm that has been seen. One of the touchstones that we use when looking at the substance of complaints and reports is whether the allegations suggest that the care provided is based on the compromising the RP's suitability to practice, or it reflects rather the RP's suitability to practice. So next, I will hand it over to my colleague Jenna to respond to the next set of questions.
Thank you. So this next question is, will trauma-informed regulation also extend to monitoring or ensuring that RPs and RP qualifying are offering trauma-informed services? So obviously the expectation that RPs work in a way that is trauma-informed is part of the professional practice standards and entry to practice competencies. RPs are expected to integrate intersectional and trauma-informed approaches into their work, taking into consideration the unique circumstances of individual clients within the therapeutic process. We just completed a review of the standards where this expectation was reinforced, and we will be undertaking a review of the entry to practice competencies in the coming year to ensure that those being registered are able to provide the quality of care expected of RPs. And then finally, I just wanted to add that the DEI working group is in the midst of developing a practice standard specific to non-discrimination and cultural safety. So adherence to the standard will be monitored through the complaints and reports process. And then I think the next one is for Amy.
Thanks, Jenna. So the last question that we received through the survey, where are the minutes to the CRPO council meeting with details of discussion which took place? So this person, I responded to this person directly. I provided the link to the minutes. The report was discussed at the December 2023 meeting of council. All of our council meeting materials and all of our approved council minutes are posted on the CRPO website, crpo.ca/council meetings, and we can provide that link. The link to the report was provided in the email communication that went out regarding this specific town hall. So the link was provided there, but we can provide it again when we post the slides and the recording of this presentation. And I think that is the last question. So we still have 15 minutes to respond to any questions that you have live. If you want to unmute yourself or put your question into the chat, we can certainly hang out here to respond to those questions.
I had a question that I put in the chat. My name's Gwen Shedrowski, and it was just in relation to Nakai's answer. I didn't understand the last part of what you were saying. I don't know if you could say that line again. Sometimes these meetings go really fast with lots of, acronyms. And anyway, it's hard to understand what we're actually talking about if you're not sort of into the policy, more the practice. So could you just explain what you meant? Were you talking about that you would evaluate the RP to make sure that they were qualified? Is that what you were saying? Or
Thanks, Gwen. I'm sorry, I kind of bumbled that. So what I was trying to state was that when we're looking at the substance of complaints and reports, we're trying to determine whether the allegation suggests that there's an issue or a concern with respect to the RP suitability to practice. So that's what I intended to convey. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that is. Thank you.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Is anyone else seeing anything? Or Virginia, if we're missing anything that you might be seeing? Short and sweet.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to Town Hall number 3. We will get this recording posted onto our website and on our YouTube channel, and we'll share the link with those, if anyone you think this topic might be of interest to anyone, feel free to share. And if you have any questions about the report or about any of the recommendations in the report, you can always reach out to each of us here, all of the staff. We're happy to respond to any of your questions.